They say time changes everything, but some stories, they don't fade with time. Instead, they grow deeper. This is the story of an old mansion, a place of grandeur and luxury, but one that hid a profound loneliness behind its walls. The master of the palace, Don Raimundo, was one of the wealthiest men, but also one of the loneliest in the city. He had an immense fortune, but an empty heart. He had obtained almost everything in life, except for one thing: peace. In that same mansion lived a servant, Miguel. 30 years old, a simple face, a loyal gaze, and lips that were always silent. He spoke little and listened a lot. And perhaps because of that, everyone saw him as just a simple servant. Every morning, he would open the grand doors of the house, water the flowers, and dust the portraits of the old master, smiling, as if greeting an invisible bond. Don Raimundo used to watch him and say, "Miguel, you are strange. You don't speak like the other servants. There's a silence in your eyes, as if you know many things, but are afraid to say them." Miguel would reply with a faint smile, "Sir, a servant doesn't need to know, only to obey." And so the days passed. For years the routine was the same. The faces in the mansion changed, but Miguel was always there, in every corner, in every breath of that house. Sometimes, in the darkness of night, when everyone was asleep, Miguel would open an old book. Its yellowed pages held a few photographs: a woman, a child, and a signature. R. Mendoza. He would stare at them for a long time, as if searching for his entire life within them. One night, the old gardener saw him. He asked, "Whose photos are those, Miguel?" Miguel remained silent. Then he answered, "Of the people who were once mine, but now only live in memories." The next day, news swept through the mansion. Don Raimundo was gravely ill. Doctors came and went, and a heavy silence filled every room. Miguel stayed by his side all day, giving him water, praying for him. Sometimes, the master would take his hand and say, "Miguel, if one day I am gone, take care of this house. These walls know you better than they know me." And Miguel would only reply, "Yes, sir." The days passed until that moment arrived, when the entire house was filled with mourning. Don Raimundo, who had always been everyone's pillar, was now resting beneath the earth. Everyone cried, saying, "An era has ended." But no one noticed that Miguel's face was not covered in tears, but with a strange silence, a silence that hid a secret. After the burial, the lawyer announced, "The will shall be opened tomorrow at noon." And that night was the longest the mansion had ever known. Everyone wanted to know who would inherit the fortune. Sons, daughters, relatives, they all waited anxiously. Only one man remained silent, sitting in a corner, with no ambition in his eyes, only fear and anticipation: Miguel. The next morning, as the sun lit up the mansion's courtyard, everyone gathered to hear the reading of the will. On every face, there was curiosity. In every gaze, suspicion. And when the lawyer read the first line, everyone froze. The moment the will was opened felt like the end of a centuries-long wait. All eyes were fixed on the lawyer, and a strange weight hung in the air. The lawyer unfolded the document, adjusted his glasses, and began to read slowly. "I, Don Raimundo Mendoza, being of sound mind, do hereby declare this my last will and testament. I leave all my properties, lands, businesses, and this mansion to my son, the one the world knows only as the servant, Miguel Mendoza." For a moment, time stood still. A silence so profound filled the room that only breathing could be heard. Then, chaos erupted. Shouts, protests, voices filled with anger and confusion. "It's a lie! How can a simple servant be his son? This will is a fake!" The lawyer placed the paper back on the table and said firmly, Don Raimundo wrote this will with his own hand. His signatures are certified by the court. Miguel Mendoza has every legal right to this house and all its fortune." Miguel remained motionless. He said nothing. He stared at the floor as if he still couldn't believe that years of service were, in fact, the blood of his own family. Suddenly, a woman's voice broke the silence. It was Doña Isabel, the deceased's older sister. "This is a conspiracy. My brother would never have tarnished his name like this. A servant, our heir, impossible." The lawyer replied calmly, "Doña Isabel, this was not a decision of his pride. It was a decision of his conscience." Miguel then spoke, his voice trembling. "I never asked for wealth. I only lived with my truth. If this will has come to me, perhaps it is for a reason." Silence returned to the room. His voice held no arrogance, only pain and sincerity. Then, from a corner, an old woman rose slowly. It was Maria, the nanny who had served in the house for decades. Her eyes were filled with tears. With a faint voice, she said, "It's true. I was a witness that night, the night Don Raimundo's son was born. But circumstances forced him to hide the child. To avoid a scandal, the boy was given to a poor family in the city, and that boy was Miguel." Silence fell over everyone again. The faces turned pale. Maria wept. Miguel was never a servant. He was part of this house, the purest legacy Don Raimundo left behind. Miguel's legs trembled, his eyes filled with tears. For the first time, he looked up at the sky, as if freeing himself from the weight of a lifetime. Doña Isabel shouted furiously, "Lies! That woman is old. She's talking nonsense." But the lawyer placed another paper on the table. "This is the last letter written by Don Raimundo. Here he confesses his greatest secret, that between him and a woman named Elena, a son was born, whom he never publicly acknowledged. And now, before dying, he wished to cleanse his soul." Miguel's hands began to tremble. His lips could barely utter, "Elena. That was my mother's name. I only knew her from photographs." A deep silence covered the room. The mansion's walls seemed to watch him. The old portraits seemed to recognize his face. Every corner echoed with the past. Doña Isabel stormed out of the mansion, shouting, swearing it was all a hoax. But the others remained still, looking at Miguel, the servant who was now the master of his own home. In that moment, Miguel made a decision. He walked to the palace doors, looked at the horizon, and said in a firm voice, "This fortune, these lands, I will not accept them. They belong to this family. I only want one thing, the honor of my father's name." With that, he walked out. A gentle breeze swept through the hallways, and in the sky the clouds began to move slowly, as if nature itself was ready to write the next chapter of this story. Outside the palace gates, the wind brought a strange calm. Miguel walked slowly, as if leaving his past behind with every step. His hands were empty, but his heart was full of memories, of pain, and of questions that might never be answered. When the townspeople learned that the palace servant was actually its heir, they all whispered the same thing. "Look at the games of fate. The servant became the master." But no one knew that, even with the right to the entire fortune, Miguel had chosen to leave it all behind. He stopped by an old church in the village, the same one he used to visit with his mother as a child. He sat under the shadow of a large cross and closed his eyes. Inside him, a voice asked, was this the end or the beginning? Days passed, and Miguel began to live near the church. Simple food, a small room, and every dawn, a silent prayer. Sometimes he would gaze at the distant mansion, like a traveler observing a home where he no longer belonged. One day, Father Antonio, the local priest, approached him. He said, "Son, there is peace on your face, but in your eyes, questions still remain. Have you forgiven your father?" Miguel smiled tenderly. "I never considered him guilty, Father. Perhaps he was a prisoner of his own fear. I only wish for him to be remembered, not as a sinner, but as a human being." Father Antonio replied, "Then you must return to the palace, because if you have already forgiven, it is time to reveal the truth your father hid from the world." Miguel bowed his head. He was silent for a moment, then murmured, "Perhaps the time has come." The next day, he returned to the palace. The guards were stunned. The same servant who had renounced everything was returning. Doña Isabel was inside, still full of pride and anger, unable to accept that her lineage was tied to a servant. Miguel entered slowly and said calmly, "Doña Isabel, I haven't come for the wealth. I have come to fulfill my father's last wish. He left a letter that no one has read yet." Everyone gathered. Miguel took an old envelope from his pocket, on which was written, "To my son." It was Don Raimundo's handwriting. In a trembling voice, Miguel began to read, "Miguel, if you are reading this letter, it means I am gone. I hid you from the world because my name, my honor, and my fear were greater than my love for you. I sinned, son. I didn't have the courage to call you my son. But your loyalty and your silence became my redemption. This house, this fortune, they belong to you. But if you wish, share them with those around you. Perhaps then my soul will find peace. Your father, Raimundo." Miguel's tears fell onto the paper. The entire room fell silent. No one uttered a word. That truth had broken a family, but it had also brought it back together. Doña Isabel slowly approached. Her eyes were also wet. She took Miguel's hand and said in a broken voice, "Perhaps we judged you wrongly. You were never a servant. You were always part of our blood." Miguel lowered his head and replied, "I was just a son searching for his father's name. Now I have found it, and that is all I need." At that instant, the palace bells began to ring. Outside, it started to rain. The drops fell from the roof, as if the past itself was being washed away. Miguel looked at the sky and whispered, "Father, I have forgiven you." The rain grew heavier, and the water running down the palace walls seemed to carry away the weight of all the lost years. Thank you so much for watching this story unfold. If it moved you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing to our channel for more tales that touch the heart. See you next time.